Hey guys, it's Robbo and welcome to this week's edition of On The Grid. Just a quick one this week. I wanted to share something with you that we recorded on the Pro Audio Suite a couple of weeks ago. We had Mike Rosette on the episode and he's from iZotope and he was talking about all the new developments in RX11. Now, RX11, as we know, is a great piece of software and it does some amazing things in terms of noise reduction. But something that caught my attention and something that I dived into a bit with him was talking about AI, and not so much about how AI is affecting the plugins themselves, how it's dictating how they work, but more about where we're heading with the way we use them. And his answer was so intriguing, so I thought I'd share it with you. Just see what you think.
Well, I mean, it's getting to the point where you just you'll type into chat like, here's, you put in 60 minutes of a street interview and you just basically say to it, make this sound nice.
What defines nice?
Yeah.
Well, part of what happens with the training that you can do over time is as you add more and more data sets. And so, for example, let's get specific. If we're trying to train dialogue isolate, we're going to use audio that sounds like clean speech, like in really great shape. And we're going to use the kind of noise that you would want to pull out of speech. And then you would do the same thing with reverb. You'd take reverberant spaces with an echo in the background and you train on that. And the thing that's kind of amazing about AI and machine learning and neural nets is essentially what you're doing is you're just using a lot of an example that's relevant to what you're doing. So as I mentioned, you could be training on weather data. You could be training on stock market data. You could be training on, modeling what happens when a car hits a wall, for example. And as you train on enough data, you begin to see the patterns. And then those patterns allow you to build them into the algorithm. And so I could take a piece of audio that we've never trained on, but when we throw it into dialogue isolate, the patterns that are characteristic of what the difference is between dialogue, what the difference between speeches get recognized. So as sort of chat stuff's coming into the world and we have qualifying words like nice or good, you can start to build a set of responses behind that. Nice is probably a little flaky at this point. You might want to say probably a more useful prompt would be denoise this piece of dialogue or denoise this interview or clean up the background audio you know what I mean? It'll be a little more directive. But the whole
it's just going to get to the point where clean it up and then they'll do the rap version without the swear words too.
Yeah.
They'll just be included in there literally.
Hey, iZotope.
Clean version, literally.
Just get rid of the hammering in the background of Robert's audio.
Sorry.
So I guess the question that comes from that, from being able to sort of say, hey, just do this. And this is kind of me folding two questions in that I had into one, because I kind of see the possibilities when you say that is, I also use Nectar occasionally. And so the two questions I have is, firstly, is sort of will some of this noise reduction stuff fall into Nectar? And then secondly, if you take that a step further in that case, sort of will, EQ and compression and all that sort of stuff be able to say, hey, Nectar, I want my audio to sound like this. I want this voice to sound like this. And the reason I ask is because even with podcasts, for example, I have a distinct sound that I give to this podcast, a way I EQ the voices and do the mastering and all that sort of stuff. And the other podcast that I do isn't produced by me. I do one about radio imaging, and Adam, who's in the UK, who puts that show together, he gives it a very FM sound. It's very compressed, very over EQ'd and compressed and all that sort of stuff. So do you see a time when all that may well come together?
Yes, I nothing you described is out of the realm of possibility. Again, it's what you decide to train on. So you've got the data, essentially the patterns of what any one of those things sounds like, and then you can put them together, which is what I was kind of hinting at with reverb and dialogue isolate. But I think the grail for folks is, I'm a little focused on my world because of RX, but let me expand it a little bit. So I'm always talking about like, oh, you got raw location sound or an interview or something, you need to clean that up. How do you do that fast? Could you drop it into RX? Could you give it a command? Could it clean it up and spit that out? But if you're doing more complicated mixing, I mean, in theory, you should be able to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to do, a jazz combo with 4 musicians. These are the folks playing. This is acoustically recorded. I have a stereo pair on the drums. I need to think about denoising. I need to think about EQ. You wouldn't say think, but you need to handle EQ and compression.
Yeah.
In theory, you're going to be able to do that. And I don't think that's that far off. Yeah.
Wow.
So there you go. For those of you who sit at home and maybe ponder some of the functions in RX11 or some of these other plugins, it may well be the case that in the not too distant future, you really don't have to understand that tech. You may just be able to be saying to a piece of software, hey, make it sound, well, we sort of talked about nice, but I'm sure they'll come up with a word that works. Make something sound nice. So that's just a quick glimpse into where we're headed. So hopefully you got something out of that, and I'll catch you next week with another episode of On the Grid. Don't forget to subscribe and like, and also check out the website justaskrobbo.com if you need any help with anything that you're working on.